How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. I know a lot of you are anticipating who the Lakers are going to add with the 15th and final spot in their team, likely through the upcoming buyout market. And while there's no guarantee which players will be bought out of their current contracts, we can make realistic predictions by looking at how these players are performing relative to how much money they're being paid, how their team is performing, and any rumors that may indicate that they could be bought out of their contract. And with many people agreeing that the biggest current need for the Laker team is another center, that will be the primary target for our list. Though they could also potentially make a trade to acquire a center, so I will also be including a couple of other positional players in here too. Because if they did make a trade to acquire a center, the next biggest position of need that they'd likely target will be another 3-and-D wing defender. And before we get into the actual players included in the video, I'm going to begin with a few players who won't be included and why. And the players I'm referring to are Andre Drummond, LaMarcus Aldridge, JaVale McGee, and George Hill. They won't be included because they all have either legitimate trade value and their teams won't be looking to buy them out, or in the case of JaVale McGee, where even if he would get bought out, he wouldn't be eligible to return to the Lakers anyway. And that is because after trading a player, that player cannot return to the team that traded them even after getting waived or bought out of their contract by their new team. He would first have to go to another team and then either get traded back to the Lakers or get waived again by that team, which all makes it incredibly unlikely that he'd end up with the Lakers again. We can definitely rule him out. So for our actual buyout candidate list, each of these players are buyout targets because they either aren't performing up to their current contract, their team isn't in the playoff picture, they have been benched for another player, or a combination of all of it. And while each player may be a buyout candidate for one reason or another, that doesn't mean they couldn't help contribute to a different team in a better way. Also, these players aren't ranked in any particular order, so I'm not saying any one player on here is better than the other. But with all that being said, the first player we'll look at is James Ennis III. Currently playing for a plummeting Orlando Magic team that has been devastated by injuries, I can't imagine they'll try and keep their team together for much longer. At the time when I'm recording this video, they're currently 8 games under 500 and aren't even in a position to play in the play-in game. And although Ennis isn't the problem and has actually been having arguably the most productive year of his entire career, he is a 30-year-old player making above a minimum level contract on a below average team. All of that can lead to being a likely buyout candidate for a team that would probably be smart to try and tank for a higher draft pick. It's very unlikely the Magic recover enough to make a playoff push, and because of that, they likely could be moving on from a few of their veteran players around the trade deadline and buyout market deadline. And if he would get bought out, he would be a very underrated target for many teams. The Lakers in particular might be interested too. Although they need another big man, they also could use another bigger wing defender who can shoot from the 3-point line too. And that is the role that Ennis could definitely fill for them. He's been a solid wing defender for Orlando, while quietly shooting over 44% from the 3-point line. Overall, he'd be a very underrated addition for any contender looking to bulk up their depth on the wing and add another capable 3-point shooter. He does have a little bit of trade value, so that is a possibility too, but if they can't find a trade partner for him, if they decide to blow up their team, he'd be a great buyout candidate target. But moving on to the next buyout candidate, which is Gorgui Dieng. Although he is a productive veteran player yet, he isn't playing up to his hefty $17 million contract. He's already behind Valanciunas and Brandon Clark in their rotation, but he's also been losing playing time to Xavier Tillman lately too. And with Jaren Jackson Jr. potentially returning, he may completely fade out of their rotation in the near future. And while again, he is a productive player, he isn't worth what he is being paid, which would make him very hard to get equal trade value for. That could potentially make him a very likely buyout candidate and one that the Lakers need to be monitoring. He is a productive player yet that could help solve their depth problem at center. He isn't an elite rim protector, but he is definitely capable of playing that role of a rim protector and rebounder off their bench. And if we look at his career per 36-minute average, he does average 10 rebounds a game and over a block and a half a game too. He gives good production in both areas, even if he isn't elite in either area. Along with that, he is actually a very underrated shooter from both the mid-range and 3-point line. He's been shooting at a very impressive 50% from the 3-point line this year and shot over 35% from the 3-point line in 2019-2020. I don't think many people recognize how efficiently he's been shooting the ball lately. His ability to shoot the ball adds a lot of value to his game in today's NBA. While I don't think there's any way he'll be able to maintain a 50% mark from the 3-point line all year, if he could shoot between 35 and 40% again like he did last year, he would be a great pickup for any team. Again, he isn't an elite player in any one area, but he does have the ability to positively impact a team in multiple areas, and for the Laker team, he would add much needed depth at the center position with his rebounding and rim protecting ability, while being able to play in a lineup with either Anthony Davis or Montrezl Harrell due to his ability to stretch the floor and shoot from the 3-point line. He is definitely a player they need to keep an eye on. But moving on to our next buyout candidate, which is Ed Davis. I included him in my prior video I made about potential big men who could likely get bought out of their current contracts, and nothing has changed from then. I still believe he's very likely a buyout candidate due to not getting much playing time and being a veteran player on his team. He's pretty far down in their rotation by now, and they likely don't view him as a vital part of their team either. And with the Timberwolves being far out of the playoff picture already, and not having much of a high likelihood of getting back into it, they may look to cut ties with a veteran player like Ed Davis to free up more time for younger players. And although Ed Davis isn't an elite player by any means, he remains a very productive rebounder and capable rim protector off the bench. He's never played a lot of minutes per game in any year of his career, but if you look at his per 36-minute average for the past 4 years, he's actually been one of the most productive rebounders in the entire NBA, averaging over 15 rebounds per game. And for a team like the Lakers, who at times could definitely use another rebounder and bigger body down low, Davis could be a great target for them. No, he isn't a great player on offense, but he would definitely add more toughness and physicality down low. He is a better rim protector than either of Gasol or Harrell at this point, and could be played on the court with Anthony Davis to allow him to play at power forward. He is a high effort player that doesn't always get appreciated. There might be better overall targets than him, but he is by no means a bad option. Now moving on to our next buyout candidate, which is Garrett Temple. The absolute definition of a journeyman, Temple is currently playing for his 10th NBA team with Chicago, but if their team doesn't begin to improve quickly and look like a legitimate playoff team, or a team that will at least get into the play-in game, he will be a very likely buyout candidate. Even though he is a productive player yet, they brought him in mainly to help mentor their younger players, but again, if their team doesn't begin to improve very soon, they could look to move on from multiple veteran players on their team, especially if they do ever decide to trade Zach LaVine. With Temple being 34 years old and making well over a minimum level contract, it will be very difficult for them to get equal trade value in return for him. And although he isn't a big man, his versatility as a player would make him an intriguing buyout target for the Laker team. He can play positions 1 through 3 and defend them as well. His high IQ and good defensive ability have allowed him to remain in the NBA for a decade now, and for good reason. He can do pretty much everything that you'd want from a wing player on both ends of the floor, and is a great locker room guy too. I'd put him behind some of the big men on here for the Lakers in particular, but if they were able to acquire a center through a trade, then Temple would be a good target for them following that. Up next though, we got Aron Baynes, another player I included in my prior buyout candidate video, but he remains a good target if he does become available. However, in the short time from when I put out that video, his team has actually begun to start improving. Toronto is likely to make the playoffs, but if they don't look like an actual contender by the trade deadline, there are rumors they may look to trade Kyle Lowry. And if that happens, then they may look to start rebuilding their team completely, which could lead to a guy like Aron Baynes getting bought out of his contract. He's been playing a bit better lately, but he hasn't been a good fit for them overall, and they nearly always look better with Chris Boucher on the court and with him on the bench. He isn't a great fit for their team, but that doesn't mean he couldn't add value to a different team. And I do believe that Baynes could potentially help the Lakers. No, he isn't a great rim protector, but he is a fairly mobile big man that at the very least gives good effort while rebounding and attempting to contest every shot. Along with that, he is a capable 3-point shooter, which would allow him to be a good fit in a lineup with either Anthony Davis or Montrezl Harrell. And I think a high effort, bruiser type of big man like himself would be a good fit beside AD too. He can not only defend the bigger, more physical big men that AD doesn't like to have to match up all year with, but he can also be a threat from the 3-point line as their center, which allows LeBron and AD to get easier opportunities at the rim. Overall, I personally think he'd be a good target for them if he ever does get bought out. Up next though, we got Trevor Ariza. He's likely been the most rumored buyout target for the Lakers, and for good reason. He not only has a connection to them by being a former Laker, but I believe it's only a matter of time before he does actually get bought out. He doesn't have a lot of trade value due to having a very large contract, and both he and the Thunder have no intentions of him ever playing for them. The only way he doesn't get eventually bought out is if the Thunder are too stubborn to let him go for nothing. Though, with all of the draft picks the Thunder already have, I don't think that'll be a problem for them. Ariza is probably one of the most likely buyout candidates in the entire NBA. While I do think the Lakers need another center more than a wing player, Ariza could be a good target for their team. And the way I actually propose that they could get both Ariza and another big man is by acquiring a big man through a trade involving one of the players they don't use, like Alfonso McKinney. That will allow them to acquire both another big man and Trevor Ariza, who could add a bigger wing defender to their team. He isn't the defender he used to be, but he is still a crafty player who they could use to help defend some of the bigger wing players they'll likely have to face in the playoffs, like Kawhi, Paul George, or Devin Booker. I personally really like to see him being brought back. But moving on, the next buyout candidate we'll review is Robin Lopez, who I believe might be the best overall buyout candidate for the Laker team, and let me explain why. First of all, he's actually a very likely buyout candidate as he's playing on a poor Washington Wizards team. Along with that, he's everything they'd want in a backup center. He's capable of playing both like a traditional big man who can protect the rim and rebound at a high level, but he can also shoot from the 3-point line too. He isn't an elite 3-point shooter, but he is definitely capable of stepping out to the 3-point line and hitting a shot every now and again. That would allow him to be a good fit in a lineup with either Anthony Davis or Montrezl Harrell. He's very efficient at finishing around the rim and is a big body overall that would add a lot of much needed size to the rotation, especially for when AD might need to miss a game like he has lately. Along with that, he's more mobile than Gasol is at this point too. He doesn't have the playmaking ability of Gasol, but he can be a better rim protector and fit on the floor for them with AD. And if I were the Lakers, he'd be one of my top priorities and definitely a player to keep an eye on in the buyout market. Finally though, the last player we'll look at is Otto Porter Jr. This one will probably come as a surprise to a lot of you, but it really isn't out of the realm of possibility, especially if the Bulls aren't able to make a playoff push. Otto Porter is currently making over $28 million this year and hasn't been able to play up to his contract even when he is able to be on the court. Since being traded to Chicago in 2018-2019, he's only played a total of 45 games with them since then. His inability to stay healthy, along with his numbers not being good enough for how much money he's being paid, pretty much makes his trade value zero. Even on an expiring contract, they wouldn't be able to get equal trade value in return for him. He's a good 3-and-D player when he's healthy, but he just hasn't been able to do that. He is obviously a risky player to have because of how injury prone he is, but for a team like the Lakers who could afford to take that risk, he could be a great low risk, high reward option for them. They could pick him up even if he's not completely healthy, allow him to rehab until playoff time, and then add him to their rotation late in the year and make their team even deeper than it is right now. He could be that bigger 3-and-D wing defender for them that they don't really have yet. He's only 27 years old, and when he's actually able to get on the court, he is a very productive player yet. He's a career 40% shooter from the 3-point line, along with having good defensive capabilities. Again, he isn't the most likely buyout candidate here, but I would say it's more likely to happen than them being able to find a good trade partner for him. Though, that'll do it for my complete list on who I believe would be the best buyout candidate targets for the Laker team. But let me know who you think they should target in the buyout market. Is it a player on my list, or is it a player that I didn't even include? Let me know by commenting down below and we can talk about it there. But that'll do it for this video. Thank you to everyone who took the time to watch till the end of the video. I really hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, please remember to drop a like and to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and turn on notifications to get notified right away when I drop a video. But as always, thank you for watching and have a great day.